closed captioning for the professors is provided in part by the Clifford Law Offices, a personal injury and wrongful death law firm in Chicago.
Chicago is one of the few school districts in the nation that has never had an elected school board. So is it time for a change? And would that change make any difference in the performance of the city's public schools? That's coming up next on today's edition of The Professors. Joining us to talk about the prospect of an elected school board in Chicago are Pauline Lipman, professor at the University of Illinois, Chicago, Ann Luzine, professor at John Marshall School of Law, Dr. Nick Panamitros, attorney and professor at Kennedy King College, and Brandon Johnson, chairman of the Chicago Teachers Union's Black Caucus. And we should mention that a spokesperson for the Chicago Public Schools turned down our invitation to appear on today's program. All right, let's begin. I'm going to ask the question, just answer yes or no, and we'll take the conversation from there. So your response is yes, no, maybe. Should there be an elected school board? Pauline, yes?
Yes.
Oh, I wasn't implying you should say yes, by the way. Nick?
Maybe.
Brandon?
Absolutely, yes.
Ann?
I'm a convert. I used to say no for many years, but now I say yes.
What? Mm-hmm. Okay. Pauline and Ann, I'm going to start with you first.
How about you?
I say perhaps.
Okay.
And I'm not saying that to be on the fence. I say perhaps, but a couple of things have got to come into play in order to satisfy me if it was CM's world, okay? Pauline, you wrote a paper about this topic, correct? Can you say, was it an independent paper or?
Yes, it was published by the Collaborative for Equity and Justice in Education. Myself and a colleague, Eric Gutstein, who's also a professor at UIC. And we wanted to look into asking the question, should Chicago in fact have an elected representative school board? And so we looked at Chicago Public Schools records since 1995 when the mayor got the authority to appoint the school board.
And that's Mayor Daley.
And that was Mayor Daley then, and of course Rahm Emanuel now. And what we found is that since 1995, that the achievement and graduation rates have been pretty much stagnant in Chicago public schools, that we've closed now, which was, you know, we wrote this before this has happened, but now 150 neighborhood public schools. Some African-American neighborhoods are mainly bereft of public schools. There's been tremendous churn in the system. 5 CEOs in the last 4 years. With little benefit to students. The research does not show that any of these policies have actually benefited students. And most important, there is absolutely no democracy in Chicago public schools. And that's very clear, you know, from the research and from the experiences of parents in the city. And we also learned that 94% of the school districts in the country have elected school boards. So we looked into those urban school districts that have elected boards and tried to look at ways in which they're actually more functional and effective.
Okay, and Ann, you were going to ask?
Yes.
Yeah.
Did you look at the history before 1995? Because
yes, we did, actually.
I began with the Chicago Public Schools as a kindergartner in February 1948 and graduated from high school in 1960. And I can tell you that always the appointed school boards represented political factions. They represented interest groups, all appointed by the mayor. And I think almost all of the mayors had never gone to the Chicago Public Schools, had no family members in the Chicago Public Schools. There was always a labor guy there. There was somebody from industry. There was somebody from each of the major ethnic groups, except it took a long time for anybody to think, gee, there should be an African American or a Hispanic on the school board. So I think what's happened is it's always been behind the times, and it has reflected the mayor's political base.
But at one point there was an actual, was it the NAC a commission that would actually make recommendations to the mayor that actually gave him a list to consider, and so that's been completely wiped out, correct?
Right, and that was a product of the 1988 school reform law, which established local school councils, which are the most democratically elected governing body actually in any city in the United States. And so this is a very local democratic process, and when LSCs work well, there's a real voice for parents and community members. So for a period of time, those local school councils propose 60 members to a school board, and then the mayor chose among those 60 members. So that wasn't democracy.
Was he required to choose?
Yes, he was.
He could not go outside?
That's right. And if the mayor rejected them, then the local school councils had to propose others. So that was not a democratically elected school board, but at least there was some minimal
element of democracy.
Yeah.
And why was that eliminated, or when?
Well, in 1995.
That also went away in 95.
Yes, when the mayor took control of the school board and established a corporate board and CEOs from business, essentially, to run Chicago Public Schools ever since.
How did he do that? He went to the aldermen and asked them to vote on it.
No, he actually went to Springfield. The state legislature at that time had the ability to actually provide that type of autonomy. And so what we've seen when the state was controlled by Republicans at that time, for that brief moment, Mayor Daley took advantage of that, gained access to control the public schools, which, by the way, came with a $6 billion budget. So let's just be clear that this was not just simply about gaining control over the public schools. This was about actually controlling the economic positioning for this city. And so since 1995, if we fast forward, as Pauline alluded to, we've seen the impact of these policies overwhelmingly destroyed black communities. Since 1995, we've seen a gradual decline of black educators. So in 1995, before Mayor Daley took control of the public school system, half of the teachers were black. Since then, it's been exacerbated under this mayor, where we're now down, black educators down to roughly 24%. And the number of Hispanic teachers is even worse, I think around 16, 17%. So with corporate control, essentially, of the public schools that has moved towards this privatization of our public school systems, finding a way in which these corporations could benefit financially, and there was no commitment clearly to the educational development of our children. This is what we have right now. 50 schools closed. My sons are being raised in a community that does not have a neighborhood school. And as a parent, as someone who's an educator, as someone that sees black labor as an intricate part to the development of a community, this appointed school board, which behaves like a cabinet for this mayor, has decimated black communities and has caused the undermining of the black middle class.
All right, so we're perfectly clear. Let's let everyone understand there is no criteria whatsoever that the mayor, the sitting mayor, needs to follow or should follow when he selects who he or she wants to sit on their board, correct?
That is correct.
All right, Nick?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, what was the basis for the causal effect of less Latino and African-American professors being hired? How do you substantiate that?
Sure. So with mayoral control, what you've seen is this move to privatize public education, which also comes with closing schools. The schools that have been closed are overwhelmingly in black communities, right? And so as a black educator, we naturally are gravitated towards the communities in which raised us, right? So when a school gets closed in Inglewood or Austin, like what we've seen here, where 95% of the staff is black. And so the consequence of mayoral control and people in Chicago not having democracy is just that, where the working class families in this city are constantly under assault.
Does anybody know how many members of the school board and key administrators are themselves graduates of the Chicago Public Schools K through 12? A point that I keep making. I am. Does anybody out of the Chicago Public Schools go back?
You would hope that would at least be one of the criteria to say, okay, at some point, either you had to have gone through the Chicago Public School System, or you have a child that's going through the Chicago Public School System. Because I agree with you. I do believe that when you have boards that are constructed in this way, it does yield a very wide path to cognitive dissonance. And so they don't understand what it means to have a neighborhood school. They don't understand what does it mean to, okay, if I live in a predominantly black neighborhood, I'm going to go to this school. It's nice to see myself when I'm in the classroom. And that's not to say it is a scapegoat or to say, okay, so now are you saying that we want all black schools? I'm not saying that. What I'm saying, there's an element of diversity and there's an added value that comes to reinforce the education process in a way that I guess, I don't know how else to extend it without going into some big sociological diagram. What I want to talk about then is, okay, because you know me, I always hate to describe the water while drowning, so we get it. We all believe that the Chicago Public School Board, Nick says maybe, I say perhaps, and everyone else says yes. So what would that look like? What would that look like? What are some of the ideas?
Well, I could talk about the campaign for an elected school board and what folks have put forward in the legislation that people are actually trying to push through Springfield.
Well, let's talk about that. What's going on with that?
So what's being proposed by there? So there is a citywide coalition that, you know, honestly,
and that's code, right?
It's called Communities Organized for Democracy and Education. It stretches from Oakdale Gardens to Rogers Park, from the lake all the way west to Austin. It's multiple community organizations of parents, black, white, Latino, middle class, working class. We've really not seen a rainbow coalition like this, you know, since Harold Washington, so it's quite significant. And that coalition is putting forward a proposal for an elected board that would be elected representatively. That means from representatives from the South, the Southwest, the North, and the West.
So each geographical region will have a certain set of number of seats.
And the reason for that is because, and this was actually part of our research, what we found is that boards that were elected regionally in that way were more representative of the population at large, as opposed to corporate CEOs that could raise, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars and run a citywide campaign. And they tended to be more rooted in their communities and known by people in their communities. So that's what's being proposed, is a representative board from across the city that would be made up of parents and community members and, you know, people at large in the community.
Are you talking about an at-large election or districts?
No, by regions, by 4 regions.
So kind of like you would do an aldermanic campaign. You only get the vote for those candidates within your region.
You understand that would call for redistricting in all probability every 10 years.
Well, it would be, there are geographic regions that are
so you would use existing map lines?
Yes.
You can establish them now, but you're going to have to deal with redistricting.
That might happen.
And you know, with that horrible word gerrymandering, which I do not find anathema, but most people do. I would be more interested in a citywide elected school board. I am sure the Chicago Teachers Union, for which I have great respect, is going to urge the election of their slate of candidates. That's fine. See, to me, that's democracy. And various taxpayers groups will want their candidates. It will be a free-for-all. Historically, that's why I've opposed it. Now I think this is inevitable, and I think it would be better than what we have now, which is a school board that is just simply a reflection of the mayor.
Now, I get it. I get that it will be better than what we have now.
Why would it be better than we have now?
Because what we have now is a board that is not intellectually diverse.
Yeah, but
no, that's not my reason.
I don't think so.
That's my reason.
My reason is that it's nothing but a reflection of the mayor.
And it's also a reflection of the population not being involved. Listen, we have elections for mayor, and how many times does it come up during debates about the school? Does the teachers union hold a mayoral debate?
Sure.
Yes,
Do
obviously.
they have the mayor there and all the candidates there?
Absolutely, we do that all the time.
And don't the issues come out then and there?
But the mayoral candidates are not required to participate, are they not?
They're not required, and not only that, again, this is something that has to be changed in Springfield. So whether or not a mayor is in favor or against an elected representative of the school board, look, I don't care who the mayor is. The point is, as a parent, as a teacher, as someone who is raising a family in Austin, right now there was a decision that was made that I did not give anyone permission to close my neighborhood school.
Well, this is
I did
true.
not give anyone permission to say it's okay to fire overwhelmingly black women who have committed themselves to this profession and to these communities, to let go teachers' assistants and security guards who often live in the communities in which they service. You know, and so what we're looking at is voter suppression, essentially, right? I mean, we're talking about 50 years removed from that march in Washington, as voting rights are constantly being assaulted, and while voting rights that we have gained over the last 50 years are being rolled back, we essentially have the same program that's being carried out in Chicago, that voters in Chicago do not have say-so on who controls and operates the public school system. And this is a very painful history that we do not want to discuss, but it is something that is only being executed in communities of color.
That's true, and I would add to that furthermore that we have, in fact, a very mobilized parent population. No one can say that parents in Chicago are not active in education. Thousands of parents have come out around the school closings. Thousands of parents came out to support the teachers union, which has been fighting against this corporate agenda. There's a tremendously mobilized population of parents and community members. But what we've seen is that no matter what people do, there's no listening, you know, at 125 South Clark Street, you know, where the school board is located. They pay no attention, so because they're not accountable to the public.
Right, they don't have to.
So until we get them accountable to the public as a first step to begin to challenge and change these policies that have been really so destructive. If you go around the country, I speak a lot around the country about this. I was just in Champaign last weekend, and Chicago is really just the, you know, the laughing stock of the country. I mean, people just look at it and they say, you mean you have no control of the school board? They do all these things. All these parents protested. Communities have put forward methods to transform their neighborhood schools. We see neighborhood schools disinvested of any resources while the money goes to a few elite magnet schools, and we have nothing to say about it. So that's, you know, it's
problematic. It is problematic.
It is problematic, but it's also the times too. Don't forget the times are difficult. The last 6 years have been extremely difficult. It's not to say that had we had a different system that it wouldn't be any different. Okay, so that's the reason why I'm on the maybe or the perhaps that you are. I think it has to do with the population participating and caring. We have all these people, these parents that care. Where are they? How come the mayor got the previous mayor had gotten voted in so many times? Why didn't it come up as a major issue during elections?
I can tell you, mayors are not reelected on the basis of the Chicago public schools. They talk about them, but they're not really reelected on the basis of what they did for the Chicago public schools. The one thing I hear more than anything from people who contribute to the mayor elections is, what's he doing regarding my taxes?
And then I think on the flip side, a lot of times incumbents are reelected not because of the overwhelming majority that think that they're doing such a great job. It's the overwhelming majority that have fatigue and have given up and said the fix is in, why do I even bother?
Absolutely.
And that's why
right.
the same incumbents keep getting elected over and over again. It's because of the people who stay at home who say, you know what, screw that, the fix is in.
And I think it's going to be different this time, I do, because the issue around public education is now a national issue, right? And so what we have to be careful here in Chicago is, wouldn't it be a disaster that the very people group, particularly in the South, that birthed the ideal of public education, and we fast forward to electing the first black president in the history of this country, that his legacy will be closing schools and the dismantling of the black middle class, particularly public sector workers. We cannot allow that to be the legacy of the first black president. And I think to another point, this notion that somehow that parents do not care, and where are they? I tell you where they are. They're working 2 and 3 jobs because we don't have livable wages in this city. We don't have health care. And so when it comes to, look, I was in a classroom where parents were not able to make it to report card pickup, but they sent their oldest child to say, look, Mr. Johnson, I'll get there, but can you leave it with my son, right? These are parents who are invested in their children, and this notion that somehow they don't care is a false narrative. And in fact, I'm one of those parents that actually does care, right? And there are thousands of parents just like me who are working every single day that want what's best for their children. And we have a mayor in this city and Democratic mayors, quite frankly, across this country and Republican governors that see the billions of dollars that are running through our public school system. They want that money. And this is not about reforming education. This is about lining the pockets of the corporate elite who want to form education in their own image. But there's a fight back in Chicago. People are organizing, as Pauline alluded to. We have folks like Ann who have ideas have emerged. You know, we got some maybes that we're trying to pull over in a second. You know, but there's a real fight. There's a real demonstration for what is right, and what is right is the right to be educated.
Let me say one thing too. Speaking as a Protestant who went to the Chicago public schools, what's now happened is a lot of my Catholic friends have said there are so many non-Catholics in the Chicago archdiocesan schools, and non-Catholics are fleeing the Chicago public schools to go to the Catholic schools, to the extent that some people I know have said there is a waiting list. Unless you're in the parish, you really can't get in. They now have a waiting list because there are parents who say, you want my child to be coming home alone at 5 o'clock at night in December in the high and holy name of a lengthened educational day?
Yeah.
And a friend of mine who works with the archdiocesan schools said, we would never do that to a child. If we were going to have them there at 5 o'clock, we'd have a bus system or some kind of an automobile system bringing them home. And at that point, parents say, I give up.
Yeah, and just one other point. Think about what the first day of school looked like in Chicago. I mean, it looked like something from 1963 in the Deep South.
I mean, I cried. It really broke my heart. I mean, this is when you really hope that people understand history. Because it really broke my heart. I was like, this is ridiculous. This feels so backwards. I'm gonna tell you, and the other time that I broke my heart is that I'm with the local 1600, and we came out to support CTU on the strike. And yes, I brought my children with me, and so we're all out, you know, striking and everything.
In red, right?
Right, in red, and my kids are having, right, we're wearing our red, you know, and we're having, you know, the kids, it's a teachable moment.
Yeah.
But there was a moment when I literally had to fight back the tears because I was like, I cannot believe this. I cannot believe that I'm actually out here protesting because some schools have AC, others don't.
Right.
Some schools have books, others don't. I'm like, that is so.
Right.
And what is it? 100 schools.
That's a hot mess, is my mother would
100
say.
schools don't have librarians, and another 160
Now, and don't get me started to
are
talk
missing
about
an art
libraries.
teacher. How many are missing a music teacher?
That's right.
I mean,
That's
and
right.
then so we talk.
And where are they?
And it just seems
They
like
were
such
laid
a
off.
hypocrisy to the commitment to education. But at the same time, you know, the great Maya Angelou also said, when people show you who they really are, you believe them. So you cannot believe someone that says, I've said before, you cannot hate the parent and love the child, or hate the child and love the parent. You have to love both. And it's until we actually get representation that truly loves the people that they serve.
Right.
And I don't think love should be a word that should not be used when we talk about political representation, because it wouldn't, this education landscape would not look the way it looks. And it doesn't matter.
That's right.
And to me, I'm almost inclined to say it doesn't matter whether Rahm sends his kids to a private school or not. If you loved all the people that you serve, it doesn't make sense that you have to argue over something like air conditioning. You have to argue over something like libraries. You have to argue.
Right.
Over books on the first day.
Right.
Yeah, talk to me. I mean, listen, I mean, helicopters, police officers are lined up down our streets. You have these so-called safe passage routes where we know it's dangerous for our children to walk, as Ann alluded to. We're talking 5 o'clock, it's gonna be dark in another month or so.
But you see, these conversations and what these realities are for us, they are benign, they are alien concepts to the board. They don't understand what it means to say, okay, I've got to make sure I'm in the house or on the bus at such and such time. I can't cross this certain street. They don't, those are alien concepts. So of course they'll recommend quick fix like, we'll have a safe passage. And even when I heard that, I'm like, really? A safe passage?
Yeah. But you know, I think it's also important to say that, so you were saying, well, they don't understand this, right? And I would say there's two parts to that.
Okay.
One part is, let's look at who they are, right? It's not just that they don't send their children to Chicago Public Schools. Our Board of Education is made up of corporate CEOs, investment bankers, and real estate investors. That's been basically what the corporate board has been since 1995.
And since 1995, what has been the agenda of the mayors? Urban reform.
That's right.
It's been the corporate agenda to privatize public education. So that's the other reason. It's not as if parents have not told them this. Parents yelled and shouted, don't do this safe passage thing. It won't be safe. Don't close our schools. It won't be safe. I go to school board meetings. School board meetings are, you get your 2 minutes to stand before a board that's not listening and say, beg, plead, demand from them all these things, music, art, etc., and you don't get it.
Okay.
Because they have a different agenda. Their agenda is, we need to be clear about is this is not a board of education. This is a board of business. They have a business agenda. So you're saying that
they don't include music and art just because they just don't want to? It doesn't, make any
we
sense.
We got to wrap up. We got to wrap up.
I'm sorry.
Well, no, they don't. Well, okay. We'll save that for the after show because I
don't think that's why.
Because sometimes you wonder what I understand what you're saying is the intent. Are they doing it intentionally or unintentionally? And then that's when you get into, well, there are some added values to other agendas, such as to come after and to dismantle public education also means to come after and dismantle one of the largest unions.
That's exactly
Especially one of the largest unions that's one of the most diverse unions that they've ever seen.
And that is in the forefront nationally of teachers' unions.
Forefront. And then you also talk about that, what does that mean to say, okay, now how do I get a hold of this money? And then how do I help my other agendas, such as urban renewal programs, which we know is gentrification, and now we've got these new neighborhood developments. And but I want to talk to you also about this new thing called the Neighborhood Action Council. Okay, so that's our show for today. The conversation continues online at WYCC.org. See you next time on The Professors.